are the challenges that you face? And Julius Kofi Menu, an international consultant, is seated right here in our studios at Nama 6 Anyete Avenue, right here in East Legon, Accra. And yes, we're going to talk about conflict resolution. Thank you very much for coming. Good morning, Mr. Menu.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
We're delighted to have you. Conflict resolution and relationship management. First of all, I mean, let's start with Mr. Menu as why conflict resolution? How did you find yourself in this conflict resolution and relationship management space?
Well, I think it came naturally by way of my professional life and also my academic pursuits also.
Okay.
Starting off as a ministerial personnel or person. So I started study theology.
Oh wow!
To start off with.
That's good.
Yeah. And so I found myself in the midst of the ministry, and this just requires communication. Besides, I went there from there to study international relations, international business, which also involve to a greater degree conflict management at the international levels. But on the other hand, I studied and practiced as a psychotherapist and psychological counselor, and also studied organizational development. All these areas consolidate, communication. Communication is a useful tool in all these areas. But I practice also, not just studying them.
Oh, that's good to know. What are the most common causes of conflict? First of all, what is conflict and what causes conflict in both personal and professional relationships?
When conflict is basically disagreement and inability to resolve them before they degenerate. This is what conflict is when in a broader sense, when we talk about conflicts. What causes them? There is a host of issues that could cause conflict. Now, conflict is a breakdown of interpersonal relationships.
Okay.
Right. At the individual level, at the group or the working environment, it's also a breakdown of intra-personal relationships and issues that crops out of it. If I may take the second part of the question again, if you may take it again.
Yeah, I was asking about the common causes of, first of all, what is conflict and what are the common causes?
So the common causes of conflict mean it's a host of issues. It could just basic disagreements. It could be jealousy at work, if it's in the workplace, the politics, workplace politics. Mainly that is the crust or the real source of conflict in the workplace. At the family level or at the individual level, it could be anything. Our inability to regulate our emotions, misunderstanding. It could be some insignificant misunderstanding that could have ballooned into something else, falling out with your friends. It could be, nothing as just disagreeing as to what drink we should have, right? Between couples, it could be, something as, what should we eat today? I want to have sex today, and I don't want to have sex today because I'm not feeling well. It could lead to conflict. It could be, at the family level, it could be how we absorb or treat the in-laws, especially in our context. It could be just cultural issues. It could be also be different values, and yes. So there's a host of things that could generate conflict. But in a nutshell, these are what they boil down to.
Okay, so is conflict inevitable?
Conflict.
Can you exist without conflict? Is it possible?
Yes, it is possible to exist without conflict because it's avoidable.
Okay.
Right. So if you have the skills to avoid conflict in the first place, they wouldn't exist. But let me say that it is also necessary in human relationships because it helps us to develop, it helps us to grow, it helps us to sharpen our skills and learn to deal with other persons better, because you take the experience, one experience to the other. If I had a conflict in my family between my siblings and I, learning to resolve the conflicts, would also help me develop better relationships in the workplace.
Okay.
And in the larger community. So it is a process of growth. It's a process of self-development and self-awareness. It helps you also to become aware of yourself. So in as much as it is inevitable and we could exist without it, it is necessary for our development and our growth.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. What role does communication play in conflict?
Communication is the avenue of modulating our interpersonal relationships.
Okay.
Right. Now, it's different from speaking. It's different from talking. Communication entails more than just speaking to someone.
Okay.
Communication is speaking to understand ourselves. It is engaging at a level that is more deeper than just blabbing or uttering words.
Okay.
Right. It's not poetry. It's not music, but it could be music, and it could be poetry, right? It could be a preaching, right, at the religious level. But communication is also involve the use of our emotions, is understanding ourselves better. It is, if you like, let me say, the operating system for interpersonal existence.
Oh, okay. The operating system.
Yes, right. Okay, and it also serves as the antivirus for right.
I like that.
Right.
I like that.
It serves also as the antivirus for all the nuances and the unhealthy issues that comes in between in our relationships formation in our
so using the computer analogy, then we are the hardware.
Yes, we are the hardware. Okay. We are the hardware. Certainly. Yes.
Okay, so how can effective communication help in resolving conflicts?
How can effective communication help in resolving conflict? It is the parameters. It is this, or it is the parameter within which a conflict is resolved.
Meaning, if there is a conflict and we take out communication, that conflict can never be resolved.
No, absolutely not. I mean, we cannot resolve conflict without communication. And it's not just the resolution of conflict. I mean, it is just the channel of our interconnectedness.
Okay.
Right. And communication, the breakdown of communication is what results in conflict. Right. And to repair the relationship also requires
the same
communication. But like I said earlier, at a different level. Right.
Oh, okay. The level that caused the conflict.
Right.
If we're going to resolve the conflict, the communication must go to another level.
It has to go to another, yes.
Okay.
Obviously, but simply because there has been some misunderstanding or non-application of certain skills or certain values which have resulted in communication. And the key of it is understanding, respecting, the each other, not being judgmental if you want to resolve conflict, being empathic. I mean, these are the basic ingredients and the skills that are required to resolve conflicts. That is when I say that it goes a bit deeper. That is what I mean.
Okay.
So the communication process has to be genuine. It has to be sincere. It has to be honest. It has to be open, right? And the issues have to be defined. There has to be cooperation. There must be the willingness to resolve the issue that has led to the breakdown in communication and consequently has resulted in the conflict.
Okay.
Right. And that is what I mean.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I during the COVID, in fact, after the COVID, a colleague of mine then comes over and she's not looking too happy. So I was asking, what really happened? I mean, I think it was even during the COVID. Then she goes like, oh, she had a friend that they had an issue. I mean, I didn't want to go into whatever issues were, but she had, and then the friend traveled outside the country. And there was no concrete attempts for her to call the friend or something. So the friend travels. And then that morning, she had been told that the friend had passed away via COVID. It was devastating to her. And I remember her saying, if only I had spoken to her. The friend traveling and she not consciously calling to communicate is what you are saying, that the absence of that communication is what led the conflict to extend and extend and extend, and now the friend is gone.
Yeah, but that's different.
Okay.
You see, there is communication, one hand, which is the keeping in touch,
okay,
which you just described, right? Now, of course, keeping in touch requires, communication. I mean, husband and wife at home, husband leaves for work and wife leaves for work, or wife stays at home, and then he doesn't hear from husband, or they don't hear from each other till evening. Anything could pass between that period. And if it's a culture within the family that, we call to check up on each other every hour, it shows concern. Now, the capacity for concern is also another ingredient, in human relationship, right? The lack of it, as a matter of fact, is pathological.
Wow.
Yes.
If you don't show consent to somebody, there's something wrong with you.
Yes. If you have no capacity of concern, as a matter of fact, you define as a psychopath or a narcissist. If you lack the capacity of concern for another. Now, trust me, there could be the lack of it even in marital relationships, or a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, amorous relationship could be lacking in the capacity of concern, which is basically means that one of the two parties is in there solely for their interest and not for the other person's interest.
Okay.
Right. Now that happens. So the scenario that you just described, falls within one of those parameters. At a certain point, the relationship has dissipated or has worn out, and then there was no checking on each other, and then of course something happened. But in life we could also be preoccupied with so many other issues. It doesn't necessarily mean that the other person didn't care for the other one who passed. It just probably
she did. I mean, of course, that's why she's worried.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, she might have been preoccupied with issues, and so didn't make the effort to check on her until that happened. So yes, we do have these issues also in our relationships, but they are really not the major issues of concern when we're talking about self-development, conflicts, and how we manage the conflicts.
Interesting. Right. So what are some communication barriers that escalate conflicts?
Misunderstanding.
Okay, because communication is supposed to be, I say, you understand, you respond. So if there is a break in understanding,
yes,
that can cause a conflict.
Yes, misunderstanding. Now, misunderstanding could also stem from different values, different worldviews, different perspective on issues, or it could also be just a complete negligence of the other person's views or needs. Arrogance, stonewalling, gaslighting, right? These could be all barriers to communication. In other words, I don't hear you when you talk. I'm not interested in what you say. I'm your boss. Do what I say, and regardless. So these are some of the barriers to communication.
So let's say there's a heated argument.
Right.
What would you advise as key techniques to use in de-escalating such a situation?
To de-escalate a conflict, you have to it's emotional regulation, the regulation of your emotions, Now here before we're going into emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Right. Because tempers are high, emotions are off the roof. Nobody hears each other. It results in probably shouting or throwing tantrums and not wanting to, receive other person's views or even want to know, right? These are the issues here. So the first thing to do is to try to calm down, right?
Okay.
But before you could calm yourself down, you must see the whole process requires conscious effort,
Okay.
right?
It won't come naturally.
No,
So you must put in effort.
correct.
Okay.
Because our natural tendencies comes with defenses, right? Now, the higher your defenses, the less likely that you would be able to engage in healthy communication or resolve conflict when they arise. So the first thing to do is to try to be conscious. And I'll give you an example. Once upon a time, I was driving in the street of London, and then I made a turn. I made a turn wrongly because the other person had a priority and didn't. And she flashed me. It was a lady. As soon as she flashed me, here my hands goes out, basically, giving her the, F off.
Yeah.
And then I paused and had to ask myself why I did that. Right. I was in the wrong.
You were wrong.
Right. But my natural defense was to react in a negative manner. Right. Now, of course, that is taking us into another conflict. Right.
Okay.
Right. But immediately, I had to pause and ask myself, why did I do that for? So this is coming from some unconscious, place, right? I had to be conscious in order to be able to stop myself or reflect on what just happened.
Okay.
Right. Now, that is the first place, you need to find yourself if you want to resolve a conflict. As soon as conflict arises, fall back into your reserve or your conscious resource. Right. First thing you need to ask yourself, why is this happening? Right. Now, once you find yourself in that position, it opens up all the issues for you now, to be able to regain yourself, regain your emotions, and then try to take the next step to resolving the issue. Immediately, you take a deep breath, you calm yourself down.
Okay.
Right.
That's interesting.
Right. And then you could then look at the issues, have you been disrespectful to, the other person, or have you been disrespectful to each other? And if you have, how do we then resolve it? Naturally, you have to acknowledge your position, right? And even if you have regained your position and other person hasn't, then it becomes incumbent on you to try to help the other person to regain themselves. Now you're taking the first step to resolve conflict.
Okay.
Right. This is at the interpersonal level. So it's recognizing the issue. After having taken yourself through this process, you're recognizing the issues, you're defining the issues, right? And then you're seeking cooperation as to how to resolve it, listening empathically to each other, recognizing the other person's views, et cetera, and then, be honest also to each other, and then, you move on to try to address the issues. In the workplace, it could be, as just mentioned earlier, it could be the politics. It could be a bossy boss who is, has no regard for other person's feelings. All right.
Okay.
In the family settings, it could also be the same. So the steps to address the issues is taking personal responsibility.
Taking personal responsibility. Okay.
Right. And then trying to, if the other person hasn't, as I said, because we different. You know, you may take the lead because you have been able to regain yourself and recognize the issues. You have been able to tap into your subconscious or your conscious level to bring the issues forth, depending on your skills, depending on your maturity levels, and depending on your exposure, depending on the responsibility that you have in all this, or your responsibility and accountability to other persons, so that all this helps you to lead the process in addressing the issues. And then once you have gotten yourself there, then it becomes incumbent on you to take the next step to addressing the issues.
Okay, you touched on emotional intelligence.
Right.
What is it, and what role does it play in managing and resolving conflicts?
Emotional intelligence is basically the ability to recognize and mediate your emotions, or manage your emotions. In a nutshell, this is what emotional intelligence means. Because we're driven by emotions, because emotions are raw and very often impulsive, right? If we don't manage them, they spill all over the place. It could be anger, which is in most cases the primary operating system of our emotions. You get angry, for no reason, but there is a reason, right? And the reason is somewhere in your subconscious.
Okay.
Right. So that, in a nutshell, like I said, is the ability to manage all these emotions. It could be jealousy, and why you're jealous. You need to be able to understand why you are jealous. It could be anything. This is a host of emotions that all forms part of our defense mechanisms.
Okay.
Right? So it's the ability to break through your emotions and recognize your defenses and use them constructively to address your relationship with others. This is what emotional intelligence is about. In the past, the emphasis was all on intelligent quotient. But
IQ.
IQ. So the better you can work out the maths, the better you could work out the figures, the better you can understand. You could pass your exams, and the higher grades you get, the better positions you are gotten, or you are given, and then you are put in charge to manage people, right? But your emotional quotient may be lacking, which then does not help to manage relationships effectively in order to get a better output. And it's the same thing even at the family level, right? If father, come from an abusive background and have never been able to internalize or integrate his emotions, it results in further abuse of his own children and his spouse, and etc. and etc. So it's just better that we understand our emotions and how they affect our interaction, our relationship with others.
Okay, so in other words, you can be book smart and emotionally dumb.
Yes, absolutely.
And that would affect whether it's a family, whether it's a business relationship, personal relationship, it would still be affected. So you're smart, you figure smart.
Yes.
Einstein level kind of smart, but very dumb emotionally.
Yes, and we have that. I mean, that certainly is the challenge now in most workplaces, right? Because bosses are, that way inclined, right? They bullies, they, narcissists, they have no regard for, anybody. He earned his degree, he got a first class, and that's why he's in that position. And then, if you're not, if you're not up to at par with him, he looks down on you. He bullies you. But it's also happened even in institutions of learning.
Academia.
Oh yes, in academia they happen. Of course, they happen. I mean, I had that experience growing up in school. I was really never good at maths, but I could never figure out why I was never good at maths. Until I grew up to realize that, in fact, I was never taught maths.
Oh wow!
Right. And on a secondary school level, I had a teacher who was practically a bully. Come to class arrogantly, and it's just on the board. Whether you understood it or not, it's none of his business. But that's how it is in our universities. You hear about this culture of pull him down. They all evolve. From all these issues, right? These are unresolved issues. Personal unresolved issues that we take up there and then dump it on others that we have responsibility for. So it could be at every level.
Interesting. It's just gone past the half-hour mark here, and we've just about 25 minutes to go. Let's talk about preventative measures in relationship management. What proactive steps can individuals take to prevent conflicts in relationships?
Well, I think we have addressed.
You said one already.
Yeah, we have addressed.
The calling. I'm going to call my wife after this. Just tell her that Mr. Menu said I should check on you. I'm sure she's listening to the show.
Yeah. So well, if those are the parameters that you have, you have established with your wife, then it's better that you do that. It's not doing that, gives a different meaning, a different interpretation.
Okay.
And then when your wife begins to suspect that you may be with another woman, that's why you've not called today.
It's true.
Well,
it's true.
Right. So they lead to misunderstanding. Right. So, talking about, some, steps to avoid it. Yes. One, let's try to eliminate the issues of misunderstanding.
Okay.
Anything that could possibly, result in misunderstanding, let's, try to get grip of it, right, and deal with it constructively, or handle it constructively. Let's be good listeners.
Right. That's a good one.
Yeah, let's be good listeners, active listeners, to our spouse.
What is the difference? Hearing and listening, and then now going beyond listening and say active listening. What is that?
Well, constructive or active listening is listening to, it's this open-mindedness to what the other person is saying. It's to ensure that you understand what the other person is saying. You may not necessarily agree, but at least, I want to understand what you're saying. Is it what you mean? Right. Other than making assumptions, assuming that I have heard you and therefore I have understood you.
Okay.
Right.
I get it.
Okay. It's also try to be non-judgmental, regardless of how how what the other person is coming with. Yes, I don't agree with you, but yes, those are my views, and whether they sit well with you or not, don't be judgmental about it. Because the moment you begin to be judgmental about someone's views, you lose them.
That's a good point. You need to repeat that. The moment you begin to be judgmental about somebody's views, you lose that one.
You lose them.
Okay.
Right.
Because they hold that view dear. So you begin to, go against that view and go against them, and say it makes them feel like they're dumb or something.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, either they're dumb or either you stonewalling them. Right.
Okay.
And that means that there's no communication. Because it's your views may be brilliant, but they may not be best, and they may not be ideal for the situation. And the dumbest idea could be even the best for the for the situation at hand. So that is why we need to listen to each other and make sure that we understand what each other is saying.
I picture this in a discussion like this. If two people are having a discussion, one is scientifically minded.
Yes.
and then the beginning of the conversation, the other one goes like, "Oh, I had an encounter with a ghost yesterday." If the scientifically minded guy doesn't open up and get rid of his prejudices, what you're saying is that conversation is ended already.
That's right.
Because for him, you must be silly to believe they are ghosts.
I'm quite interested that you said that, because I had the same thing yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Well, it wasn't about a ghost. It was about a dream, where somebody communicating to me about a dream they had. Of course, to them, it's a reality. It converts into reality.
It's going to happen.
Yes.
What they saw in the dream.
Right. And then I was attempting to explain to the other person that, well, these are issues that probably were already in your head, right? They may things that have occurred in the day, or already, things happening in your life. And of course, they convert into dreams. But of course, they religiously.
He didn't want the person didn't want to listen to.
Of course, religiously want to hold on to the. But it's just, you have to understand also that it serves a purpose for them, Right. Okay. They are in their comfort zone. It helps them deal with their issues and their emotions, right? And if holding on to that belief is what works for them, then you need to give them the space to process that, to their comfort. It's not for your comfort. Right. We just wanted you to listen.
It's not for you to come in and dissect their dream and see, this is not spiritual.
They're not coming for therapy. So don't go therapize them.
I like that.
Right. So you're not going to be the psychiatrist now who's going to sit there and try to psychoanalyze, the dream and tell them, give them your version of it. But that is what I try to do. And immediately I realized that no, they didn't come for that. They came, right. I had to take a step back and give them and acknowledge their feelings and acknowledge their belief, system. It served their comfort, right? So in a life, things are not cast, in stones and concrete in life.
Okay.
There are flexibilities, for each and every one of us. Even the best scientific, opinions sometimes are wrong.
Every time, the Lancet will come out and say what someone thought 10 years ago wasn't right. So,
right.
Yeah,
so,
you're absolutely
exactly.
Right.
But as long as, someone's views serves a purpose for them, you have to be able to listen empathically, listen non-judgmentally, and don't be condescending.
Okay.
Right.
That's interesting.
Right. Yes.
I like that bit. But that brings me to mind something else. We are told they are this whole concept of locus of control, where they say there are those who believe that they have control over the outcomes, and so they are more like internal locus of control, and there are those who think everything is external, and there are some external forces working on them. Those they call those with the external locus of control. When two people with these two opposite loci or whatever you call it of viewpoints come together, is that not a recipe for disaster?
Not really. It could be a source of conflict, and it is already a source of conflict in academia because there is a disagreement, and disagreement is what we call conflict.
Okay.
But it depends on to what degree the conflict affects our lives, particularly our daily lives, and the impact they have on us. Disagreements in academia is healthy.
Okay.
Right. At a professional level, disagreements are healthy because they help us to explore further, research further, to come out with, to prove or disprove the view. But at the family or the interpersonal level, they degenerate. Right.
Oh, okay.
Right. They degenerate into, and become toxic. Now, is the toxicity that we're trying to address here?
Is it not because in the family or in the interpersonal relationship, we have more emotions invested in it than the business or workplace?
Yes, and even in a workplace, we do same. We have, emotions invested also in the workplace. All right. Yes. So you realize that, moving on from the private environment to the public environment, the emotions, the modulations of emotions, adjust itself, or we're able to adjust it. And that's because there are boundaries. At the family level, you realize that the boundaries are very thin.
Okay.
Right. And so the propensity to cross those boundaries are also, very high. In the workplace, for example, the boundaries are well defined, and so the propensity to violate or to cross those boundaries are very low.
Okay.
Right. In academia, it's even different. Right. So, if you're in the military, for example, you realize that, listen, the boundaries are very rigid, right? And because you are in a straitjacket a place or position, you are forced to get hold of your emotions.
Okay.
Right. It also doesn't mean that it is healthy, because in that environment, the emotions are not recognized.
Yeah.
Right. In most cases.
If a commanding officer says jump, you don't say, why are you saying that? Why did you use that tone of voice on me? But if you went to him and said jump, there'll be trouble.
Of course.
Of course. Interesting.
Yeah. So different environments call for different approaches and different engagements.
Interesting. Negotiation.
Yeah.
What role does it play in conflict management?
Negotiation is the avenue or the channel to address issues. It is also the conscious effort to make sure that conflict is resolved.
Okay.
Right. It requires certain steps be taken, such as defining the issues, recognizing the issues, bringing parties together, and making sure that there is a win-win situation at the end of the day, committing to the process and committing to the outcome. That is what negotiation means. But that's also different from bargaining. Okay. Even though bargaining skills may be used in negotiations, it's just entirely different. So negotiation is a mediation process that is to a healthy, end to a conflict in a more constructive and more conscious manner.
Okay.
Right. Bargaining, on the other hand, is the distributive approach. I win and you lose. One person wins, or one person gets the upper hand, and the other, goes home with little or nothing. This is different. Those are used in business negotiations when you are negotiating a contract, for example. Those will be, you go into negotiation, but that's entirely different from mediation. So if you want to get if you want to negotiate a contract or get a good deal in a business process, you take the bargaining approach. But okay, when conflict resolves, you have to resort to negotiation to resolve the conflict.
Oh, okay. That brings me to. Okay, so it's almost a quarter to the top of the hour. That actually means we have just 10 minutes to wrap up this conversation. We're talking to an international consultant of some in huge repute, if I could say. I'm excited to have him in the studio. His name is Julius Kofi Menu. We're talking conflict resolution and relationship management right here on Mondays. You know the way we call our Mondays. It's Personal Growth and Development Mondays, right here on Z in the morning. You've had experiences with conflict resolution and personal. What would you say is the impact of unresolved conflicts?
Well, the impact of of unresolved conflict is disaster. It means that the conflict lingers on, and it could balloon into something else. At the individual level, it means that we may never speak again or talk again. That's probably the end of our friendship. It's end of relationship between siblings. It is also at the community level. It could result in violence in most cases. The Boko conflict, you have it, the Nkunya and Alavanyo conflict. I mean, these are conflicts that come from antiquity, or these are historical. But because we have never sat down to address those issues, they linger on. Different religious opinion, especially at the community level, Christians, Muslims are fighting, but the Pope and the head of the Islamic establishment in Saudi are not fighting. Right. They understand each other. They cordial. They have healthy and decent professional communications. But here we are fighting because there are issues that we have not addressed at the communal level. So yes. In the workplace, it is the same thing. It could lead to low productivity, for the individual, and of course, it impacts the organization. Between husband and wife, what it results to. It could be the end of the relationship, or it could lead to, enduring unhappiness, between husband and wife. So it is absolutely important that conflict are resolved one way or the other, and to bring a finality to the issues and then ensure that we live happily. But having said that, there are also various avenues besides addressing conflicts, in different in the private forum or fora. There are conflicts also that requires to be addressed at different places. In the law court, for example, if it's a disagreement that could never be resolved, then that has to be resolved to the law court to address them. That's why we take divorce cases to court, for example. Mm-hmm. That's why contracts contractual relationships that could not be addressed by negotiations or mediations also have to resort to the law court to address them. But it's important that conflict are resolved to bring an end to the issues.
Okay, since we began this conversation and in introducing yourself said you had a bit of theology background, let me go back into theology.
Right.
Forgiveness is a central theme.
Yeah.
How important is forgiveness and conflict resolution?
Well, it depends on what you are forgiven. The popular saying that forgive and forget. Yes, forgiveness is one of the attributes of God, right? If now we got into theology.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. But God also punishes, right, which means that he has not forgiven where it's necessary.
Okay.
Right. So, yes. But at the end of the day, I mean, the crust of theology is the fact that regardless of what God does, he tries to maintain, a balanced relationship with humanity. Right?
Okay.
So, yes, forgiveness is part of divinity. We are made in the image of God, and we have God's godly characteristics also. So the ability to forgive, is also part of us. In order to have a healthy interpersonal relationship, it is better that we forgive where it's necessary. But there are issues also that are difficult to forgive, and we need to be able to recognize that, because trying to force someone to forgive another when it's not coming from their place of comfort also leads to another conflict.
Okay.
Right.
That's interesting. You've straddled Ghana and the international scene.
Yeah.
What are we like in terms of conflict? Are we easily conflicted, or we're more manageable, or what is your experience between the Ghanaian and, the European or the foreigner or the white? What is your experience like?
Well, they say human beings are human beings generally in the
Okay.
first and foremost.
Okay.
We all humans. We have the same emotions, that drives us. Right. Now, the difference are just culture, values, views, moral and ethical, moral and ethical understandings or positions on issues. Those are the difference. The Ghanaian here is no different from the typical British person. There may be issues of cultural differences, and that is just it. And of course, it's an experience that I had in Nigeria. The first time I went to Nigeria was in 2009, and I had gone from UK to Nigeria to consult. Now, I had a cultural shock, right there and then, that you realize that people were very aggressive, easily irritated, ready to pounce on each other. And then I came to Ghana from Nigeria. Those were the period when there was a flood of Nigerians in Ghana.
Okay.
When they were coming, they were flocking in. And I noticed something, that our streets have become, the motorists, were becoming very aggressive. Now, each time I saw, it was a common scene then, and my prejudice, I started pointing fingers. Each time I saw somebody, driving rough, I said, that must be a Nigerian, because that's exactly how they drive in Nigeria.
Okay.
Right. Because I've driven in Ghana, and that wasn't the experience. So the trooping in of the Nigerians in Ghana, and then observing the same thing that was happening in Nigeria here in Ghana now. So I was prejudiced to say that it was a Nigerian, but I may have been wrong. Culture is dynamic. Human society, is dynamic, and we change from time to time. In Ghana, and our culture is not the same it is when I was a young child. I was a young child growing up.
Okay.
It's just a lot have changed now, and you realize it's a generational issue. So when you hear the old people and the older generation say that in our time things were different, in our times it wasn't like that, and it's quite true that things have changed also. Now back to the question that you asked, to be precisely, I think it's just cultural issues. But there are also, when I talk about cultural issues, also refer to policies of governments, public policies, laws that regulate behavior of individuals. You realize that in Ghana you get away with murder. You can't do that in Europe, for example. In Nigeria, for example, it's even worse. That, some of the things you get away with in Nigeria, you could never get away with them in Ghana. And I remember when Nigerians come here and say, Ghana, initially they thought Ghana was a soft, the Ghanaian people are too soft. My friend General Matthias, if he's listening to me, gave me some of these experiences when the first time he came to Ghana and sat in a restaurant when he was served, and I think the waiter had made some minor error, and his instinct was just to begin to shout and yell at him. And then the waiter just turned around and quietly asked him, say, what's the matter? Are we fighting? Immediately he said he felt disarmed. Right. That was a waiter, who was correcting him or bringing to his consciousness what he was doing. That was unnecessary. But in Nigeria, this is normal. And the waiter would have just gone, I'm sorry, sir, Oga. Oga, I'm sorry.
Right. It's true.
Right. So it's cultural differences. Communication, how we communicate and how we receive the codes and how we encode and how we respond to the code. And so these are just differences.
Interesting. It's just, it's 5 minutes, so we're almost about done. It's an election year. conflict could result in some damages we don't want to have. What would you advise Ghanaians, especially on this topic of conflict resolution and relationship management, vis-a-vis December 7th?
It's a political conflict. Also, different dimensions of issues that need to be looked into, And a week ago, when Time to Think Foundation launched the Peace 2024 Peaceful Election campaign, I was invited to speak on the issue. I think the problem we have here, trust me, about 99.9% of Ghanaians are peace-loving people. They will never engage in any form of conflict, right? Even with our differences and everything, the average Ghanaian is a peace-loving person. The problem we have here is that there is a certain culture that has evolved, and I'm talking about political culture. Some of the issues that I highlighted, in my discourse last week was the fact that our democracy is really something else, entirely different. Okay, and what we call democracy here is really not a democracy. Democracy goes beyond, the right to vote. Right? Okay. But we hinges ours, right, on the right to vote. And even so, okay, we've also built into that all some forms of criminality. And so if you can, by manipulation and criminality, get your way, then the rest is history. Feelings of others, the right of others, the choice of others is disregarded. Right? This is the source of conflict that we are, when we talk about political conflict or electoral conflict, these are the issues that we are dealing with. It is the same, across, various nations in Africa, particularly in West Africa. I was in Nigeria 2015, and I think it's 2011. So I saw the election that brought Jonathan into government, and I saw the elections that brought Buhari into government. As a matter of fact, I coordinated a study to de-escalate, to identify electoral violent hotspots for the Nigerian police, and how to de-escalate them.
I think this is a conversation that we should have, a broader conversation on electioneering and how to manage conflict. Thank you so much, Mr. Julius Kofi Menu, international consultant, conflict resolution and relationship management. It's a minute to the top of the hour. She's already here, standing literally on my neck, to give us the 10 a.m. news bulletin. She'll introduce herself. But anyway, all too soon. Time is up for today's edition of Z in the Morning. I have to run. I have to literally run out of the studio before she bites my head off. My name is Jerry Hum. I'll be back tomorrow, God willing.